Thinking of skipping your AC tune-up this year? Think again. Don't spend another season hoping your air conditioner works. Be sure with help from the team at Legacy. An annual tune-up keeps your AC running safely and efficiently when you need it most. Avoid costly repairs, breakdowns, and keep your AC running for years to come. Visit LegacyHeatingandAirInc.com for easy online scheduling and special offers and discounts. While you're there, sign up for an annual maintenance plan starting at just $13 a month and leave the worry to us.
Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, although it does get delayed sometimes. My name is Eric Hansen. He's Tyler James. And this is my lit living room / office. And we hope that it stays lit for the rest of the show because we're having some severe weather here in the area. So we will intend to be with you till right around 8 o'clock talking Notre Dame football like we do every week. And we have lots to talk about tonight. We'll also take your questions. None of them, please, about the electricity situation, but we'll answer anything about football. We have likes and other things, subscriptions to talk to you about before we get started, and Tyler will do that, and then off we go.
Yeah, if you're new to the YouTube proceedings, make sure you've clicked through to be able to enter the chat and submit questions. You should be able to do that if you've gone through the YouTube website or app, whether you're on desktop or mobile. But if you're trying to talk to us on a link that's embedded on social media or the website, you won't be able to do that. So make sure you click through. Once you're at YouTube, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell for reminders, hit the like button, show support for the show. We appreciate everyone already chatting. Thanks for being here tonight. If you are not a subscriber to our website, we will continue to remind you that we have a special promotion available for you. If you use the promo code NDYT, which is exclusive to our YouTube audience here, when you sign up, you can get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, which is where we spend a lot of our time and share our inside information first. There's a link to sign up in the video description below. Hopefully, if you have not already, you will consider giving us a shot at InsideNDSports.com.
Okay, we are taking stock in Notre Dame football after graduation weekend and before veterans report back on June 2nd. Tyler had a really good post in our Insider Lounge about all the guys that graduated. And it wasn't just from the current team. There were some people that had been on the team earlier, like Philip Riley, Tyler Buckner, Drew Pine, and so forth, that took part in graduation. So that was a really cool post to see all the guys, lots of advanced degrees as well.
Yeah.
But as far as the people that will be back next year, Notre Dame remains at 88 scholarship players, 3 over the limit, as players are now free to go home, study abroad, work on internships, etc. Before reporting back, which is really soon, on June 2nd for the summer, incoming freshmen enrolling for the first time are due to report on June 9th. So our opening drive is recalibrating Notre Dame's 2024 trajectory. And today, Monday, ESPN's Mark Schlabach, who I think is an outstanding college football writer, came out with a set of post-spring top 25 rankings that had Notre Dame at number 5 behind Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon in that order. And it's quite a contrast to another recent projection that left the Irish out of the top 30. That was also by a national writer, but not for ESPN. And the opponents in the ESPN rankings were Florida State at number 11, USC at 25, and then Louisville and Texas A&M were among the schools, a handful of schools that just missed the top 25. So Tyler, where we will start tonight, between the number 5 of ESPN and the not in the top 30, which is closer to reality, and is either one hitting it on the button?
I think number 5 is closer to reality. I'm comfortable if you want to move Notre Dame down to, say, number 10 or maybe even the teens if you want to be super skeptical. But outside the top 30, that's not realistic to me. I think Notre Dame would be in the top 30 even if both of its tackles stink and Riley Leonard doesn't play at all. Like, Notre Dame could be a top 30 team with Steve Angeli and 2 bad offensive tackles. That's how good the defense should be. That's how good I think the running game could be. That's how improved I think the offensive game plan and passing weapons should be. So I don't know what was going on with that top 30 list. Had to be a mistake. And I don't know that person will ever truly live that down. Those are the kind of takes that from a fan base perspective really will stick with you, and it's going to be hard to forget about that. What do you think?
Yeah, when I looked at the teams and what they had done with the portal in the spring, that was what was kind of cool about ESPN's ranking is Mark went through each of those top 25 teams and mentioned some spring developments, what they had gotten in the portal, if there were any significant injuries. And I would peg Notre Dame in the 8 to 10 range. I think they're definitely a top 12 team. I think that should be the goal for them, is to make the playoff, and I think it'll be a disappointing year if they don't. And I think the ceiling is a little bit higher than that. They could be a team that could win a playoff game. The top 30 thing was crazy. And there's a lot that we don't know about this team. And so that's where I'll take us next, Tyler, is what do we need to learn over the summer and in the opening part of training camp that will help us determine a clear picture of what the Irish bottom line will look like in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of the same things we've been talking about throughout the spring since the end of last season. Offensive tackle improvement, some sense of what that looks like, if there's cohesion along the offensive line in general as all the other spots get settled as well. Riley Leonard developing chemistry with his receivers, and obviously his quest to remain healthy. The linebackers need to solidify their roles and figure out what the right combination. Notre Dame's coaching staff needs to figure out the right combination of using those guys. And then I think figuring out what sort of cornerback depth. I think that's farther down the list. But that's something obviously that we've talked about potentially Notre Dame needing to add in the transfer portal, and doesn't seem like that'll happen other than a preferred walk-on at this point. So those are the questions that I have that I think we'll start to get some insight as we get into the summer and into the start of training camp. But those questions can't really be answered resoundingly until Notre Dame opens the season at Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think that's a good gauge. I also think the things that could push the ceiling higher for Notre Dame beyond Riley Leonard's health and the things that you mentioned, who of the 10 new guys that are coming in June, well, I guess it's 11 if we include the punter and James Rendell, but the 8 June enrolling freshmen, the 2 grad transfers that were on campus but not participating in spring practice this spring, and that's Bo Collins, a wide receiver, and Rod Hurd II at safety. I mean, both those guys intrigue me a lot because we expect Rod to be a starter, but Bo Collins could be the best receiver, or he could be just kind of a middle of the pack guy. What's your sense of Bo Collins as you kind of look back at what he did at Clemson?
Yeah, it's hard to gauge like how much of his limitations were related to Clemson's offense and Clemson's offense having its own issues. How can he be better used at Notre Dame? I don't know exactly what to expect. I wouldn't be surprised if he turns out to be a stud. And I don't know that I would be shocked if he's just one of the guys, like he's a slightly better version of what Deion Colzie has been the past few seasons for Notre Dame. So I don't really know what to expect. I think I'm willing to be open to that, but I think it's hard to forecast too highly about him because we just haven't seen him yet, and there's just he's had enough opportunity at Clemson to be like a bona fide go-to guy, and I don't know that he ever really developed into that, and why that is, I don't know that we have the answer for. So I think that maybe leads you to be a little bit questionable of what exactly is the high end for Bo Collins at Notre Dame. What do you think?
Having done the series with Matt Jansen, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, and how much Notre Dame really hones in on players, especially opponents, and researches them and how they would fit and how they winnow down that list. The fact that Notre Dame really wanted Bo Collins and that Bo Collins really felt Notre Dame was a fit that could improve him makes me suspicious that maybe he's better than we think he is, that maybe this is a bigger deal. Or it could be Notre Dame looking at it and saying, we don't know how good Micah Gilbert's going to be. We don't know if Deion Colsey's going to stick around. And we don't know if Jaden Thomas is going to be healthy. And then Bo Collins could be just one of the guys.
Right.
So those are the two directions that pushes me.
Irish fan has a pretty safe bet here. I'd be willing to bet that Bo will contribute more than Caleb Smith from Virginia Tech. That's probably a pretty safe bet, Irish fan. Caleb Smith didn't make it out of his spring at Notre Dame.
Right. He necessitated a nickname for the other Caleb Smith on the roster, KK Smith, and KK has kept that nickname instead of going back to being Caleb Smith. We were trying to figure out how we were going to call them, and then Marcus Freeman rescued us and said, you know what, he's cool with being KK. So that may just be a made up name. They might have just said arbitrarily KK.
No, I think people already called him KK back where he was from. I don't think Notre Dame invented that one.
Okay. We'll call you EJ Smith. Okay, before we get into the series with Matt Jansen, do we want to take a few questions and comments?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that. First one we have is from Brian Habermel. Is there much of a concern that Notre Dame won't get down to 85? That being scholarships. I ask because ND is still carrying 4 quarterbacks, and some guys who have indicated they may transfer have not yet.
I don't think it's a concern. I think had Notre Dame added the cornerback, then maybe that would have been too tight. I think that's why you saw them back off trying to get a scholarship cornerback through the portal and then kind of go the route of, hey, let's see if somebody wants to come and be a transfer walk-on at Notre Dame. They have been higher than this before going into summer, at a higher number than 88. The thing is, there's not now the grad transfers are subjected to the same windows basically that the underclassmen are. That wasn't the case before. But there's several guys that could end up being, again, injury, medical hardships, or medical retirements. And you also have some players that are way down the depth chart that might just say, you know what, I'm going to do what Philip Riley did. I'm not going to play football anymore, but I'm going to be a Notre Dame student. And Philip Riley was one of the guys that got his degree. There were some others. Wasn't Peach one of those?
Yeah, Alex, the former long snapper.
Yeah, and he also went that route. So I'm not really concerned about it. I think if Notre Dame was, there would have been more movement at this point. And I'm just not getting that vibe. And again, they've been over 90 before going into the summer.
Yeah, to me, I guess it's a phrasing thing, but there's not a concern that they won't get down. Like they will, like they have to. It's the rules.
Yeah.
You can be concerned about how they're going to do it. You may not be a fan of them putting guys on medical retirement that maybe could still play. Like, look at what Paul Moala did for his career after he was handed that option at Notre Dame and went to Idaho and then Georgia Tech, and now signed a rookie contract with the Bears after a rookie minicamp tryout. So there's probably going to be some uncomfortable conversations and some guys that are being put in positions that maybe they don't want to be. But that is the reality of what college football has become. And that will be those conversations will be what leads to Notre Dame getting down to that 85 number, because it is a requirement, not a suggestion. Jeff Stevens asked, greetings, Tyler and Eric. Barbecue plans for the weekend. Do you want to tell them what we're doing this weekend?
We are I know what the menu is, and it's not barbecue. We're going to be together with our old colleague Carter Carls, who is getting married And thank God that Papa John's Pizza, no offense to any of the franchise owners if they're watching, but
you're really hurting our sponsorship odds for Papa John's, Eric.
That's not on the menu at either the rehearsal dinner or the reception, because we already know what that is, and it's pretty exciting. So we will be not barbecuing. Otherwise, it would have definitely been a barbecue weekend.
Jeff also asks, is the next chance to talk with Marcus Freeman just before August camp? I'm wondering about injury updates as so many key players are rehabbing.
I think that we will talk to Marcus sometime in June. I'm guessing maybe a week or two after the freshman report. So maybe around the 20th, 23rd of June. It'll probably be when I'm on vacation, but I will make sure that I'm there and come back from vacation for that opportunity.
All right. Another one, Brian, more of a question for the chat, but I thought we could chime in too. He said that he was researching and Notre Dame has a run of 6 consensus All-Americans in the last 4 years and 4 years straight with a consensus All-American, or I think he means unanimous All-American. Alt, Watts, Mayer, Hamilton, Owusu-Koramoah, and Eichenberg. Which was your favorite to watch? I'd have to go with Hamilton. Covered a lot of ground. Watts has a chance to have the honor twice. Who of those All-Americans the last few years, Eric, have been your favorite to watch or cover?
To cover, it's been Watts because of his journey, because he was the guy that really could have given up and transferred and said, I'm not going to be patient. He was very unselfish. I mean, he revealed so much about why he's going to be successful beyond football, how he handled every situation until he became an All-American. And the other thing is he made me right, because I thought he'd be a good safety. So I always liked that. I think, okay, which one is the one that was my favorite to watch? I mean, there were plays that Kyle Hamilton made that were ridiculous. But I would say Owusu-Koramoah, from the standpoint, from a physics standpoint, you're like, how can a 215-pound guy generate that much power and that much torque and hit? Mm-hmm. And Brian Kelly even talked about it a little bit. But I mean, you're talking about, would you like a ribeye, a filet mignon, a New York strip steak, a T-bone? I mean, they are all fun, and they all had great stories.
Yeah, I think, they're all impressive on and off the field. I might be partial to Michael Mayer in terms of watching play, just because as he got into the end of his career, like, everyone knew it was going to Michael Mayer, and people still couldn't find ways to stop it. And that sort of dominance was very impressive to me, and not easy to handle. And he always he appreciated the success that he had, but he also downplayed it. And I really appreciated sort of how he went about his business. Kyle Hamilton was sort of similarly dominant, but as a defensive player, you're just not getting as many chances to get your hands on the ball in the same way that Michael Mayer was. So I really liked watching Kyle Hamilton. Both of those guys as freshmen, you knew, like, okay, these guys are going to be good. Those other guys took longer to develop. Joe Alt, though, I guess he did towards the end of his freshman year. You're like, okay, maybe this Joe Alt guy is going to be the answer at left tackle, and he sure was for the next 2 years after that. So all those guys have been fun to watch, and we've been spoiled to be able to cover such a great football players for the last several years. All right, that's all I got for questions, Eric.
Okay, we are back on track. And this is Inside Notre Dame's roster building process and philosophy from my 2-part series centering on Director of Scouting Matt Jansen. There's an interesting contrast between Clemson, one of 4 schools, that service academies were the other 3, that didn't take any transfers in the last cycle. And with head coach and Dabo Sweeney, who really seems adamant about not even researching it. Philosophically, he's just opposed to it. And then Notre Dame's exhaustive process in terms of readiness of research, no matter how many transfers the Irish end up with. What are your impressions of Notre Dame's methodology, Tyler? Were you surprised when you read the series about how expansive this whole process is?
Yeah, well, first I wanted to touch on the Dabo thing. I think the way you described it, stretching his stance a bit. The quote that I saw that he said that most players in the portal can't play at Clemson, and
I listened to the whole interview. I don't think I'm stretching it.
You don't think they've researched guys and he thinks that they can't play at Clemson?
He certainly made that sound like it in the interview. I mean, I listened to the whole interview when I was in the car driving on Sunday, and he was really trying to spin this and, hey, we do take transfers. They're just transferring from high school.
Well, yeah, I mean that's stupid. I agree with that. He's trying to shine their bad outcome into a better stance.
But he's been consistent. They haven't been taking transfers. I mean, they're very limited. They're one of the least active schools. And he was, I mean, if they are researching people and if they are trying to get them, he kept coming up with different things. He goes, there's 3 kinds of transfers. And he said the kind that are going to demand a big payday. And he talked about, well, we're not going to be able to compete with that. I mean, he left me with the impression that they weren't even going to look into it. But go ahead if I've misrepresented him.
Yeah, I mean, that's how losers spin things. I mean, that's Brian Kelly got grief for the way he talked about the portal after they were going after the guys and then they didn't get him. He's like, well, that's not what we want. It's like, well, no, you wanted them. You just didn't get the guys. Obviously, it doesn't seem like Clemson's being as aggressive as someone like LSU. But like, when people were getting offended that he thought most people that are in the portal can't play at Clemson, it's just true. Like, there's over 1,000 players in the portal. Most of those guys can't play at Clemson.
Most of them can't play at Notre Dame.
Yeah. I do think Clemson needs to do a better job in the portal. They have to figure out a better path forward. But anyways, I'm sidetracking from the topic here. As it relates to the series that you did with Matt Jansen and the scouting and time that Notre Dame spends on it, obviously the show, we call it Football Never Sleeps, but evaluations never sleep for Matt Jansen and the Notre Dame staff. Seemingly they're constantly evaluating other rosters. They're constantly evaluating Notre Dame's roster. They're seeking constant feedback from Notre Dame's coaching staff in terms of what's needed to succeed at different positions. And the amount they have to work ahead, which we know this is the case, but we just don't always know exactly how it comes together, because as soon as guys go in the portal, we usually get a pretty good idea if Notre Dame's going to be interested in that. And that's not because the moment they went in the portal, they started watching film on the guy. They already have an idea of guys that they would be interested in. And Matt Jansen sort of shed some light on how Notre Dame goes about that. What stood out to you from doing that story?
One, they're lucky to have Matt Jansen. I think he's a great fit. He did this for 5 years at West Virginia, but he also has an NFL scouting background. To me, the depth that Notre Dame goes to look at the portal. So what Matt Jansen, and he started last July. So this was their first cycle to go through it. Now, they are starting cycle number 2 now for the guys that are going to be going in December. But the number of players, 30 to 50 prospects at every position group, is what they kind of build their database to be. They follow them through the season. Then as they get closer to the portal time, they condense that number down. They're saying, well, these guys weren't as good as we thought they were. Let's get rid of them. And they do it regardless of whether the player has indicated that they're going to go in the portal eventually. They just want to be ready in case they do make that decision. Notre Dame has had directors of scouting before. It's interesting to me how intertwined all the different aspects of Matt Jansen's job is with the Notre Dame self-scouting that you referenced, the opponent scouting, and how that's where they start to build the database is when he scouts the opponents. And so for me, it's just a very efficient and a very thorough process that I think really shed a lot of light on how Notre Dame is making this a science and not just, oh, well, Briley Leonard's in the portal. Let's see if we can get him. They are ready with their pitch and how they're going to fit in. And that's, again, why I'm looking at these players that we haven't seen yet that are transfers. Now, again, you have guys that are swings and misses like Antonio Carter II. But I think in general, Notre Dame is going to have more hits than misses because of their research. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask you another question, or you want to tell me how brilliant that answer was?
Brilliant answer, Eric. Brilliant answer.
Okay. Jansen provided some more context about assistant athletic director / player personnel Chad Bowden and his evaluation skills. And you've dealt with Chad on a recruiting front. How valuable in totality is Bowden's skill set in Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame's big picture?
Yeah, it's interesting. A few of us reporters at the Rivals camp in Indianapolis yesterday that work for the various rival sites in the Midwest were talking about GMs at the programs that they cover and what they do and how they're utilized differently. At Notre Dame, Chad Bowden is in that role now, and his top skill, I think, remains relationships. So he's not going to get pulled too far away from the recruits and helping develop those connections and helping convince recruits that Notre Dame is the best place for them. And that applies to the transfer portal as well. I think from my perspective, I wonder if that makes his job harder when it comes time to be blunt with the players on Notre Dame's roster, that maybe Notre Dame's encouraging to move on or seek other options. But I do know that Chad Bowden prides himself on learning as an evaluator. That's something he's done since his days at Cincinnati and trying to learn what Marcus Freeman was doing and the other coaches at the Cincinnati staff were doing. And he's continued that at Notre Dame. Notre Dame, I think both in recruiting and what we see in the portal too, is going to make moves on guys who maybe aren't big time names yet. But Notre Dame is confident in some of their evaluations, whether that's coming from Matt Jansen or Chad Bowden or someone, one of the assistant coaches on the staff. For instance, like Chad Bowden was a really big part in Notre Dame uncovering and pushing for Brandon Hillman. Now that his recruitment didn't end up working out with Notre Dame, he ended up at Michigan, but he was not a big time recruit in any sense when Notre Dame was getting in the mix there.
Did he play at Michigan this past year?
Not that I'm aware of, but I could be wrong there. I don't think he did. But yeah, I mean, Notre Dame, and we can get into that when we talk about some of the recruiting stuff, is that Notre Dame's not necessarily interested always in what the star systems say about it. They have their own evaluations that they're relying upon and judging on and make moves accordingly. So that's certainly a role and a valuable asset that Chad Bowden plays at Notre Dame, in addition to just sort of being a connection point with so many of these recruits.
Yeah, these quote him. He's not, his title doesn't say general manager, but it screams general manager. And teams really, I think, need this kind of all-encompassing position, somebody with all these skill sets to kind of pull everything together, pull the recruiting together, the transfer portal together, the re-recruiting your own roster so that you have consistency across all those places.
Yeah, and I think Matt said in one of the stories that Chad is very creative in getting the preferred walk-on transfers too. Like that is someone that Notre Dame is active in trying to find guys that can help the roster. Maybe even it's not even on game days, could be just with scout teams. But Notre Dame doesn't sort of just stay content with recruiting kids that are on campus for walk-on spots. They'll look elsewhere to get some more talent on campus that can help with them.
Okay. We're going to roll into the recruiting reset unless you stop me, Tyler.
All right. Yeah, we have some more questions we can get to here.
Okay.
Jeff Stevens asked, does Jansen also guide Notre Dame players that are thinking about going into the draft early, sort of giving them their projected draft grades?
I don't think that he does. That's not a function of his job. And that was not something that I asked about or we talked about. But when he talked about, here's what I do, that was not something that came up. But I think if I were a player, he'd be one of the guys I would at least informally ask, since he had been involved with scouting departments and personnel departments with the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens. Joe Ortiz, who is the new GM with the Los Angeles Chargers, is the guy that really helped Jansen get his start in that business.
All right. John Baker asked, is there a written contract for NIL money? Is the money distributed over each game, or is it all up front? What happens if the player is injured and can't play?
Tyler, you want to take that one?
I mean, there's all kinds of things that could be written into NIL contracts. I don't have firsthand accounts of them, and there could be disagreements on what it is or isn't legal. Frankly, I'm not terribly familiar with what is or isn't written in them. It's way too hard to get clarity and honesty on that side of things that I'd find to spend the energy that would be required to get that information. So I sort of defer to others that are or claim to be NIL experts as it relates to that. There are things that shouldn't be allowed to be written into contracts, but that doesn't necessarily, at least according to NCAA rules, but that doesn't necessarily prevent them from being put into contracts. So I think there's all kinds of things that can be put in there, depending on how, I don't know, predatory that some of these NIL folks are being with some of the players they're signing.
Yeah. For me, again, when you answer a question on NIL, especially where we are right now with this amateur athlete model evolving literally by the day, what we tell you on today's show may not be what's true next week. But my sense is that if a player's injured and can't play, they still receive their NIL money. I don't think that they say, well, sorry, you're injured. It's just as if a player in the pros is paid when they're injured and the players stay on scholarship when they're injured. So I don't know why there would be less money, but I don't know how the payments are figured out, nor do I necessarily think it's uniform. My sense of what I've heard is that it's not all one lump sum. You don't come in the door, here's your pile of cash, don't spend it all in one place, that it is distributed over time.
Yeah, I usually think there's things you have to do, especially as it relates to fund at Notre Dame, where you have to do the community service events that you're signing up for in order to receive payment for contributing to that cause. So I think that is a stipulation that can be in contracts as well. George Gipp asked, can you give a preferred walk-on an NIL contract?
You can give walk-ons NIL money. I think I'm trying to think of what school it was. It might have been Utah, where they did give.
Maybe BYU?
Maybe BYU was, out in that part of the country. It was in that state where they where the collective did say, hey, we're willing to pay the walk-ons an NIL fee, which in essence, you're not getting a scholarship, but you're getting something for being a walk-on. So I don't think that there's anything against that. There's no rule that would exclude a walk-on from getting the NIL money. And it'll be, I think, once we get a little bit farther with this amateur model, I think we're within a year of there being more standardization across from school to school. I think then we'll understand the rules with walk-ons a little bit more. They will address these kinds of questions, because unless you're going to have unlimited rosters, then you could basically have more than 85 players on scholarship, technically.
All right. The next question we have is from Brian, and it's about recruiting. So let's get into our recruiting stuff, and then we can see if we haven't answered his question about 3-star defensive linemen.
Okay, the Irish received a verbal commitment Sunday and kind of a surprise one in 2025 defensive lineman Gordy Sulfsted of Cincinnati St. Xavier. Rivals list the 6'5", 245-pound senior to be as the number 28 strong side defensive end nationally. The Irish, it appears, will groom him as an interior defensive lineman and develop him to that end. I know his dad was a former NFL offensive lineman, played at Miami of Ohio, was a 6th-round draft choice back in 2001, and played over 4 years, but 18 games over those 4 years. What are your impressions of Sulfsted's addition, Tyler?
Yeah, it's an interesting one to say the least. I've been doing a lot of reporting on who Notre Dame may end up pushing for at defensive tackle in this cycle, as it became clear that was what Notre Dame was looking for. Al Washington and the Notre Dame staff evaluated, I was told, 10 defensive tackle options this spring. We reported many of those names on the Insider Lounge and in our Trail Tracks coverage. But Sulfsted wasn't one of them. ND was clearly sold on him, wanted to keep things under wrap, I think. So maybe a bunch of other teams don't try to sway him or delay a decision. Notre Dame can get in there and get the guy that it wants. And we'll see if it pays out for Notre Dame. I don't have a huge issue. I mean, we're talking about, 1, the 5th defensive lineman in the class. 2, a lot of people are worried about 3-star defensive linemen. According to the Rivals star ratings, this is the only 3-star defensive lineman in Notre Dame's class. So if you take 1 out of 5 as a 3-star, that doesn't seem like that's a trend. But maybe you don't like Joseph Reif. I think there were people in the comments. Someone was in the comments. I don't remember which person, what their name was. But maybe you don't like Joseph Reif, maybe you don't like Dominic Hulak, maybe you don't like Davion Dixon. But
don't tell me you don't like Christopher Burgess Jr.
Yeah, maybe you don't like him either. But those are the guys that Notre Dame identified and has gone after. Maybe you want Notre Dame to get 5-star guys. I understand that. Justin Scott was someone that Notre Dame really wanted, and it just didn't work out. That's going to happen, but you went after him. It's not like they just ignored him. If you don't find an elite match, I like the idea of finding someone who can maybe grow into the role. Like look at offensive linemen, for instance, and Joe Alt would be an obvious example there. You can get great tackles out of former high school tight ends. And I think you can get great defensive tackles out of former defensive ends. And that's what Notre Dame's hoping to do here. Riley Mills and Howard Cross would be high school defensive ends that have turned into good interior defensive tackles for Notre Dame. You'd like to be able to mix in some Jerry Tillery's or Jason Adamalolas in that mix too. But Notre Dame doesn't have a full class of those. So in terms of Sulfsted himself, I think he's shown an ability to get off blocks. Certainly will need to do that more and in different ways as an interior defensive lineman at the college level. I like his tenacity and the motor that he's shown both sides of the ball, especially as a blocking tight end. He really gets after guys. I think we'll see what he looks like in a couple of years. I don't know that it's fair to make a strong judgment on what he's going to be right now because he's going to be asked to do something different than what he's doing right now. I think maybe he's Cole Mullins-ish. That's someone who was listed as a linebacker in the Rivals database. Notre Dame recruited as a defensive end. And he's already competing with Brendan Vernon as a defensive tackle as an early enrollee in the spring. So Cole missed his senior year with an injury, so we didn't get to see that development and how he sort of progressed after that. We'll get to see what Gordy does in terms of continuing to grow and prepare himself for his role at Notre Dame. So that's what I thought. I mean, you ended up covering his recruitment live because I was busy at the Rivals camp. What were your takeaways from this edition for Notre Dame?
I think it's right for people. I think it's okay for people to be skeptical. I think it's not okay for people to be conclusive that because he's a 3-star, he's going to be a flop. And why I say that, a bunch of reasons. The things that I liked about him, I liked what a good basketball player he was. I think one of our BCND, he posted this really cool shot where the ball's going out of bounds. He saves it, flips it up in the air. I mean, this is literally from about 30 feet away, and it goes into the basket. But athletic kid, he's got NFL bloodlines. Notre Dame studied him well and felt like this is a guy we really want. You look at, and then the opposite side of it is you look at his offer list and it doesn't blow you away. He had 24 offers. It was going to come down, if Notre Dame didn't jump in there with an offer, it was going to come down to Wisconsin or Duke, and he was going to pick one of those two schools probably in the next few weeks. So it wasn't like he had a great offer sheet there. And yet these types of players have worked out. I think you did a pretty extensive thing on the Insider Lounge, but I mean, just off the top of my head, if I'm looking at Notre Dame's 2024 draft class, it's Joe Alt 3-star, Blake Fisher 5, Maris Leofau 3, Cam Hart 3, JD Bertrand 3, Audric Estime 4, and Javante Jean-Baptiste, a 4-star somewhere else, but he wasn't a top 250 guy, and he was 6'5", 210 coming out of high school. At a really good high school. I mean, one that's known, and Cincinnati St. Xavier is. I mean, they'll be one of the better teams in Ohio this year. They always are. We're going to have Rocky Boyman on our podcast tomorrow, a Cincinnati St. Xavier grad, and Rocky will have something to say about it. So I tune into the podcast and see what he had to say about Gordy. But and you look at Notre Dame's defensive line right now. Howard Cross was a 3-star defensive end who got moved inside and is now an All-American. I'm not saying Gordy will be that. There's going to be some misses on the defensive line of all different star rankings for Notre Dame, but they've had a lot of hits from 3-star guys. When they've been honed in on them, you look at Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa and both Heinishes and Howard Cross, you can see that there's some success stories. So I'm willing to kind of flow with this. To me, the thing that was the head scratcher to me, other than the fact that Tyler was busy and I handled it, was the timing of it. Why was this urgent now? And again, maybe it was because he was that close to a decision with Wisconsin or Duke, and they felt like, okay, if we're going to make a move, we need to make a move now.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And yeah, my thought is maybe that you don't want to let everyone know that this is the guy you want. And then he announces his Notre Dame offer, and then a month later he visits. And if you can get him now, and Notre Dame has been looking for a while. Like I know it's early in the time in terms of when you get to sign a class, but Notre Dame's at 21 commits because it has worked so far ahead in this class. Jalen Wiggins was a guy that they were trying to get up for an official visit, and that didn't work out. And they made the move for Gordy Sulfsted. I think it's probably important to mention, if you want to go after the big dogs, especially the ones at the end of the cycle, then you're talking about more and more NIL stuff. You're getting into places that maybe Notre Dame isn't as comfortable with recruiting. So I would imagine that would play. Like someone could say, well, if you're looking for just one more guy, it's your 5th guy, why don't you just work all the way to December for that? It's like, well, what if you don't get a guy then, and you felt like you needed someone because you went all in on, I don't know, someone like a Peyton Bowen or someone like a Keon Keeley. You can get burned at the end with those guys. So I think you have to sort of find the right balance of guys that you're willing to push for to the end and guys that you want to get in your class and make sure you fill your needs early.
The other thing is he may not be a 3-star at the end of the cycle.
Right.
Kyle Hamilton was a 3-star when he verbally committed to Notre Dame. When he got his offer, and he ended up being a 5-star in one recruiting service, 4-star in Rivals, and ended up being an All-American. So we'll see. I mean, he may end up having a big senior year and move up the rankings. The question I have for you, Tyler, and I can kind of see it in some of the comments over there, is do the media and fans make too much out of these 3-star rankings, especially this early in the cycle? and being disappointed by 3 stars and get too overly excited about 5 stars or high 4 stars?
I don't mind people getting wound up. I think that's why people like us have jobs, so we can bring proper perspective to it. If they disagree, then that is okay too. But the passion is something that allows us to have a field that people are interested enough in the stuff that we're covering. Notre Dame currently has 6 3-star commits. That's maybe a little high when the class still isn't finished yet, but I don't think they'll all remain 3-star recruits. I think at this point, Matty Augustine would be the guy that I would point to as the most likely to get a 4-star. Sulfsted, he's a 3-star defensive end. Now, if Rivals analyst staff takes another look at him and say, you know what, maybe he's a 3-star defensive end, but if we're looking at him as a defensive tackle and what he projects at, maybe they see more potential in him and he becomes a 4-star recruit. So I think that can influence the thoughts on a recruit as well. Dominic Hulak is a guy that Rivals ranks as a 4-star recruit, even as a linebacker, but Notre Dame doesn't plan to play him at linebacker. They plan to play him at Viper. And so do different sites, does Rivals reconsider, okay, let's think about him as more of a weak side defensive end recruit than a linebacker, and does that change the projection we have for him? Because the skill sets and the growth that are there, those make it different. So I think those are some of the things that I consider when it comes to 3-star recruits. I think the final ranking matters the most. That'll give our analysts the most time to see their complete high school careers. Notre Dame's coaching staff doesn't always have, or almost never has, that option. They can't wait for a kid to finish his senior year to make a decision on it. If they push for guys, they can maybe do that for a couple of guys, but you gotta fill up your class well before those guys are seniors now. So they're doing projecting and figuring out what they want to do about that.
I saw somebody in the comments, and it went by too fast, mentioning about his offer sheet, and that's not going to win you a national championship. Let me, for comparison, I mean, we're talking about Joe Alt being a 3-star. What were his offers coming out of high school? Here were his offers outside of Notre Dame: Iowa, Iowa State, Kansas State, Minnesota, Missouri, Northwestern, Rutgers, Stanford, Wisconsin. So fewer offers than this kid had, and kind of similar offers.
Yeah.
And Xavier Watts was a 3-star too, and he's an All-American. And his offer sheet was very similar to Joe Alt's. A lot of Midwestern schools, obviously, who would have Nebraska in there. But I think it's okay to be disappointed, but I think we need to be open-minded that this could work out as well. I'm not willing to write this kid off at this point.
Yeah, I think it's also important to remember that if Notre Dame gets a commitment early from someone, that recruit is unlikely to continue to report the offers that they get. So I don't know if Joseph Reif has received more offers since he committed to Notre Dame. My guess would be he has. And if he hasn't, it might be because he's telling teams that he doesn't care. He's not talking to them. So when you get a commitment earlier in the cycle, an offer list is going to look different than at the end of the cycle, because more teams will have more time to offer the kid that he'll be willing to tell everyone about. Where if he's already committed to Notre Dame, he doesn't care if so-and-so offered, because he's already going to Notre Dame. So I think that influences what you see on recruiting profiles as well, that I don't think people necessarily keep in mind when they're judging what an offer list looks like to inform their value of what a recruit is. I'd be curious to how many people have watched his film versus just reacted to what his offer list and stars is as well, because I don't ever see people saying, well, he can't do this or he can't do that. It's just about his stars or his offers. And those are the people that I don't take as seriously, because we're not really having a conversation about the recruit. We're just having a conversation about other people's opinions of the recruit.
Okay, well, let's move on then. Notre Dame now sits at 21 commitments and the number 1 ranking in the 2025 cycle. How many more players, Tyler, do you think will be added to the class, and where is the most work yet to be done?
I think they'll probably get 5 or 6 more players. Receivers probably the place that they have the most work to do, and I think they'll take 1 or 2 more receivers. Linebacker, I think they'll take 1 more. I think there's a good number of options there. And the remaining options have been detailed on the heat index on the Entire Lounge. So if you want more information there, head to the Entire Lounge. And if you're not subscribe to the site so you can get all that information and keep up with everything. One more linebacker. There's about three good options left there. One more cornerback. We'll find out Saturday if that's wrapped up with Mark Zachary making his commitment announcement. One more safety. Two options there right now, Jadon Blair and Jameer Joseph. Maybe if things don't work out with those two, I don't think either of those guys are Notre Dame locks. Maybe there's some more work to do there for Notre Dame. But with a deep cornerback class, maybe one of those guys ends up moving to safety too. And then I left room for like one more wild card, whether it's a third running back, a fourth linebacker, because if two of the remaining linebackers want in, I think it's going to be hard for Notre Dame to say no to those guys because they are so talented. Maybe an athlete like Dalen Penson, who Notre Dame wants to get up for camp to see what he looks like, has a lot of speed and can play a couple of different positions. So that's what I think the rest of the 2025 cycle looks like right now, with a pretty clear path forward.
Okay. Rivals National Recruiting Director Adam Gorney on Monday wrote about some of the top 2026 prospects and how/where they were trending. You mentioned 2026 quarterback Noah Grubbs. What's the latest with the 4-star quarterback prospect in the 2026 class from Florida?
Yeah, Noah Grubbs is someone that we've been talking about for quite some time in terms of one of the top targets in the 2026 class at the position for Notre Dame. The buzz around him continues to be that Notre Dame's in really good shape with him. I put in a FutureCast pick in favor of Notre Dame for him last week. I did that with a couple of other 2026 targets, defensive end Braden Jones and defensive tackle Gabriel Hill. We'll see when people decide to get angry about their star ratings if they ever come to Notre Dame. But I think Notre Dame's off to a good start with the defensive line class and the 2026 class as well, because there are lots of options there that have Notre Dame interest early. So Notre Dame is continuing to sort of work ahead as it did with this 2025 class and getting commitments early. And we'll see if they can pull in some of their top guys.
You attended the Rivals camp in Indianapolis on Sunday. There were some Notre Dame commits/targets there. What did you think of their performance, and what are your big takeaways from that camp experience?
Yeah, a lot of guys. I really appreciate getting to see them in person. I will go into the camp with a list of guys that I know Notre Dame has recruited that I'm looking to watch, and then there's always a handful of guys that I'd never even heard of before. And that doesn't mean they're not like already have good offers, but just Notre Dame hasn't been interested. I don't have the bandwidth to know all these recruits that Illinois is recruiting or Michigan State's recruiting. But in terms of the Notre Dame guys, Christopher Burgess, he won a gold ball, which was an honorable mention for defensive line. Tennessee's Ethan Utley beat him out for MVP. Burgess also, I believe, intends to be at our Rivals 5-star camp later this summer.
In Jacksonville.
And I think there's been 4 Notre Dame commits invited to it. So for a class that's the world's worst, that seems like a pretty decent number. And Burgess being a defensive lineman, I don't know how Notre Dame recruited someone that's getting an invite to the 5-star camp when they don't know what they're doing. But anyways, sorry for being so snarky today, but it seems like people are getting their panties in a bunch over one 3-star recruit from St. Xavier High School.
We love you when you're snarky.
The other guys were 2026 guys. Ben Nichols, an offensive line target out of Michigan. He likes Notre Dame a lot. Plans to visit this summer. I thought he looked solid. Storm Miller was a guy that I wasn't terribly familiar with that Notre Dame offered in May. So a newer offer, a linebacker out of Ohio that Max Bola offered. He hopes to get to campus at some point. 2026 cornerback target, Chaston Smith out of Tennessee. He was named defensive back MVP for the camp. He has legit size, very competitive. I liked what I saw from him. Someone that I didn't know much about going into the camp, 2025 receiver Braden Trimble, who only has 3 stars. He looked better than a 3-star player to me. I think Notre Dame should consider getting involved if some of their other wide receiver options don't work out. He's from Mount Zion High School in Illinois. It's the same program as 2026 tight end target J.C. Anderson that Notre Dame is very familiar with. Trimble actually committed to Illinois today. So now I think his profile is going to be on the rise, and now Illinois is the team to beat as they got his commitment. We'll see if Illinois can hold on to him or what other programs come calling. But if he can continue to play the way he played at camp the other day, I think that means good things for him moving forward. A lot of other young guys. Tommy Tofi is a 2026 offensive tackle out of San Francisco. I liked him.
He came all the way to Indy. Wow.
Yeah. Jance Henry out of Pennsylvania. He's a short guy. He's only he's a freshman and will be a sophomore in the fall. He's 5'9", has massive quads. A couple of people were comparing.
Boy, is that short.
A couple of people were comparing him to Jance Henry. Keenan Harris out of St. Louis University High. I think he won the linebacker MVP. I think he's worth considering for an offer. Cam Thomas from Lakota West, a school that Notre Dame's familiar with, where Ben Minnick and Tabron Benny Powell played in high school. He's a 2026 linebacker that Notre Dame hasn't offered yet, but has been recruiting. So we'll see if they pull the trigger there. And some other guys, even someone like, it doesn't mean a lot for Notre Dame, but Jake Cook is a 2025 offensive lineman. I think he's out of Ohio. He's committed to Louisville. He might even be from Cincinnati specifically. Watching his development over the years has been interesting. Like I was not sure that he would be a Power 5 recruit when I first saw him, but he's developed into that and performed well and won the offensive line MVP honors at the Indianapolis camp.
Okay, do we want to take a quick lightning round through the question queue?
Yeah, I have one started from earlier. There's been so many just comments rather than questions. George Gipp is very obsessed with plaid jackets. I don't know what's going on there. Frank Sarah asked, is Tyson Ford still on Notre Dame?
Yes.
All right. Ray John wants to know, can we bulk up the Aussie punter for the defensive line?
I'll tell you what, he's 6'6", 225. He looks like he could do something on the defensive line, but I would say no. But you know what? I'm not ruling him out, making a great tackle on a punt return.
Beefeater asked, how many defensive linemen / edge players do you want on a roster?
Edge players and interior guys combined?
Yeah.
Okay, I can tell you what Notre Dame has right now, and it's a huge commitment in terms of scholarships. It's the biggest commitment on the team. Obviously, you got a lot of positions. But between defensive ends and defensive tackles right now, Notre Dame, 19 out of the 88 scholarships are committed to those positions. That seems a little high to me.
Yeah, 16 is probably around the target number that I had in mind. It's a position group where you can go 2 or 3 deep on Saturdays. So you'd like to at least have maybe 10 guys that you think can play. And then obviously the room to develop more guys, and you're going to have younger players and maybe some older players that need more time to develop. So Notre Dame is throwing a lot of resources at its defensive line. And for whatever issues you have with the recruiting, I think the defensive line play has been fairly solid. We'll see if Notre Dame can continue to uphold that this season with a veteran group and some young guys that are looking to take a step forward. All right, those are all the questions I got.
Okay, do we want to wrap it up or go into a little bit of overtime here and tackle a couple other questions? Or topics. I'll run through them real quick.
Sure.
Barring a late change, Notre Dame is done with its spring evaluations on the road a few days before evaluation window officially closes. Your thoughts on them already being done? Does that mean they're super efficient?
Yeah, I mean, they've covered a lot of ground already. You can't visit guys more than once, so it's not like they can just go back and bug Derek Meadows every week because they really want him. I think, I mean, we've been covering it. There's not many guys that I could think of that they haven't visited or made a stop to this spring, whether it's guys that have offers or don't, that they're at least somewhat familiar with. So there's also a number of days that you're allotted. I don't keep track of what those are and where Notre Dame's at with that. So they may have already actually hit their maximum. I'm not certain, but I don't think it's that big of an issue that they're not there this week. They've been out on the road for a few weeks now. I mean, Marty Biaggi deserves some time off after going to Australia and Hawaii. He's got a lot of flight miles that he can cash in on maybe. So I think getting the coaching staff back off the road isn't a bad thing.
Future casts that you made besides Noah Grubbs that you want to share?
Yeah. Well, I think I shared them all.
Okay.
Noah Grubbs, Braden Jones, and Gabriel Hill are the 2026 future casts that I put. Those are the first future casts I put in for 2026 recruits.
Jameer Joseph revealed his top 5 where he's taking his visits. Notre Dame's in that. Do we think he'll end up at Notre Dame or no? As a safety?
I don't know. The safety thing is new for Notre Dame. I don't know if that will hurt Notre Dame's efforts with him. If he's like adamant about being a cornerback, then Notre Dame's probably not going to win that recruitment. But he's still adamant about wanting to get to Notre Dame, even knowing he is being recruited as a safety and he'll get here for his official visit. So we'll see what happens there. Penn State, I think, is a school that many think he could end up at. I even heard some buzz from dotting the I's. Jeremy Birmingham, who covers Ohio State really well for Rivals, as a name that was floated that maybe Ohio State turns up the heat on with it needing a third cornerback in its class after losing one of its commitments.
Awesome. I think it was Joe Long. Boy, these go by fast. Had a real quick question that would combine women's basketball and football. Which team's going to have the better year next year?
Here we go. I found it. I'm nearly as excited. Okay, you remember it? You got it? Okay.
Yeah. I know how excited he is. I would say the women's basketball team has a higher bar. I think they are a team that has a pretty good shot at a Final Four, as long as they don't have the same injury report this year. If they do, they need to go get a voodoo curse removal.
Yeah, I think the women's basketball team, I think it has a better chance of making the semifinals of its tournament, right? I think that would be fair to say. I don't know if Notre Dame can get there. Certainly, it's not. Or the football program can get there. Certainly, it wouldn't be unbelievable if they did. But I think that the expectations are even higher for the women's basketball season than the football season. Ray John asked, when is the Indianapolis cornerback announcing? I mentioned that earlier. Saturday, the 25th. I believe it's at 2 p.m. Eastern. Mark Zachary is having his commitment announcement ceremony.
Right about the time Notre Dame's #1 lacrosse team will be finishing up its semifinal with Denver in the national semis in Philly.
And I think around the time I'll be landing in Fort Worth to spend some time with Carter Carls, our pal, for the weekend, as he's getting married this weekend. So that I think that's probably going to wrap it up for us here, Eric. Because of the wedding this weekend, and we'll be traveling on Memorial Day
holiday. Yeah.
We are going to move Football Never Sleeps next week to Tuesday. So look for us there. We'll be Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully everyone can enjoy their Memorial Day without us. Thanks to everyone who's joined us tonight. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Hit the bell for reminders of when we have content. Hit the like button to support the show. I'll have some video content from the Rivals camp coming this week. If you're not a subscriber to the website and you want to stay in touch with all the Notre Dame news that we're covering, we hope you consider taking advantage of our 30-day free trial at InsideNDSports.com with the promo code NDYT to get free access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us on the Insider Lounge. There is a link to sign up for that in the video description. And then after next week's Football Never Sleeps, Eric and I are going to be taking turns alternating vacation weeks. So we'll probably be moving the show. We'll still try to aim for Mondays if we can, but if we're getting guest hosts on that need to accommodate to a different schedule, we'll work to do that. So be patient with us as we communicate the schedule changes. As Eric mentioned earlier, we're planning to have our podcast, Inside ND Sports Podcast. We're recording that Tuesday. Rocky Boyman is our scheduled guest, so look for that in your podcast feeds. I think that's about everything. Thanks to Legacy Heating and Air for sponsoring the show. Enjoy your week, everyone, and have a happy Memorial Day weekend.